Oh, so this is it up on the right?
This is it, just here, yeah.
How do you feel being back here?
Years ago, it was a place that I actually felt a bit scared going past.
Why have you decided to talk to us about this?
I feel a moral obligation to do what I can to try and prevent others suffering. Father Michael's a bully.
Greg Price is one of the original members of the Latin Mass run by the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer. The volunteer fireman loves the Latin Mass, and for 10 years he followed the teachings of Fathers Anthony Mary and Michael Mary.
What counts for eternal salvation is serving God and doing His will.
But the story is not one of salvation, love and joy.
Be prepared for it. The devil's going to make your child slip and knock his head and cry right at the moment of the consecration.
There's definitely an undercurrent of fear and anxiety the whole time.
Mark Robinson was a brother with the Sons for 6 years. He says if you contradicted Michael Mary, you'd be punished or given a penance. Many times he was instructed to lie on the floor while others stepped over him on the way to dinner.
Another one was making the cross on the floor with your tongue.
Do you mean licking the floor?
Yeah, licking the floor in the form of a cross with your tongue like 3 times.
Mark believes such penances were not about humbling people, but humiliating them.
Do you think you're a bit traumatised when you left?
Oh, big time. It took more than 10 years to sort of get over and heal for a lot of the damage that was done. I mean, my initial thought on getting out of there was this huge sense of relief, like I'd been let out of prison.
How would you describe the leaders there, Father Michael Mary and Father Anthony Mary?
I describe him as being charismatic, but at the same time, quite controlling.
Margaret attended Mass run by the Sons for several months. She says Father Michael Mary wanted her children to join his order, and his involvement with them became unhealthy.
What do you mean by quite controlling?
Getting in contact with some of my children, and in a way, I feel behind my back.
And against your wishes?
Yes. One of my sons, he went silent, wouldn't speak to us. And then he would say, oh, I'll just see what Father Michael Mary has to say.
Another way she says the leaders became too involved was during a confession with Father Anthony Mary.
He asked me very deeply personal questions about my sex life.
And what did you make of that at the time?
Made me feel ill. I was disgusted. Made me feel sick, actually.
Margaret, Greg and Mark are not isolated cases. We've spoken to 17 people, many of whom were left traumatised from their time at the church. Many were too frightened to be interviewed on camera for fear of repercussions from the church leaders. One young person told us,
"While under the leadership of the monks, my mind was shaped into holding very extreme beliefs. That self-harm, under the guise of physical penance, pleased God, and that I could not trust anyone except the sons' priests, not even my family. The children were given very extreme examples of saints who hurt themselves. Due to the monks' teachings, I started cutting my skin while I prayed."
There is a huge focus on sin. There's a focus on doing penance. Basically, if you're lucky, you're just going to scrape into purgatory by the skin of your teeth.
Greg Price says the leaders believed some of their churchgoers were possessed by demons and went so far as to perform exorcisms. 2 of Greg's friends had them done.
My understanding is they're nothing to do with the way that a Catholic exorcism takes place, tying people around the neck to the back of a chair whilst performing the exorcism, and then holding a crucifix and stabbing at them as though the crucifix is a dagger. It's just theatrical It's madness.
Exorcisms are permitted in New Zealand, but rules dictate that a priest must have permission from a bishop each time such a ritual is carried out. The Christchurch diocese here has told me it did give approval to the sons for exorcisms on 2 adults. But we understand at least 7 people had them. It's understood one person had dozens of exorcisms performed on them. Many of them lasted several hours, sometimes 3 days in a row. They confirmed being tied up. Another source confirmed several occasions when people were forcefully held down in a chair.
Did exorcisms occur?
Yes.
Elizabeth left the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer after many years of involvement.
Did you ever have concerns about the way in which they were conducted?
Yes.
Why?
Because boundaries were overstepped.
Michael, how are you?
Michael Hempseed knows a lot about trauma and healing. He helps people struggling with mental health issues and says numerous people from the Holy Sons came to see him after their exorcisms.
The people that came to me from the oratory, they were some of the most traumatised people that I've ever worked with. I was horrified when I heard what was happening. I heard stories of people being tied down, people being what can only be described as being whipped with rosaries and things like that. They described being screamed at, having people come right up to their face, yelling at them, screaming at them, people saying, "I want this to stop, I want this to stop," and they would continue. This would go on not just for 5 minutes, but for hours and hours.
The Bishop of Auckland, Steve Lowe, has told us it is not normal to restrain someone in any way or tie them up, calling this practice cinematic.
And these were multiple people who came to you?
Multiple people, yes.
Did their stories align in terms of the trauma they endured?
Each person had a different experience, but very much there was a consistent pattern of manipulation, abusive relationships, and control and domination. Probably the most concerning one for me was that a number of people came to me and said exorcisms were being performed on children.
The Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer have denied ever performing an exorcism on a child, and no bishop has ever given them permission. The leaders say they performed minor exorcisms on children, which Michael Mary likened to the sprinkling of holy water around a person. Whatever the case, we've been told of at least one child who was left severely traumatised after being made to believe the devil had possessed them.
Did children have exorcisms ever during your time there?
Yes.
Did you think it was necessary?
No.
What could be more frightening to a child to tell them that they're possessed by a demon? What could be more psychologically frightening?
The idea of exorcism is really quite simple: to turf out whatever evil spirit, demon or devil that is possessing someone. It has been going on for as long as there has been religion, and most cultures throughout history have believed that people can become possessed and have prayers and rituals to free them. For Catholics, exorcism is an official ritual and there are actually rules. The Church's exorcism guidelines were updated in 1999 in a 90-page book written entirely in Latin, and the Vatican even ran an exorcism course in 2018 for 250 priests from all around the world. Now here are some of those rules. Only a proper priest can do an exorcism. He must have the permission of the local bishop. It must be carried out in close cooperation with the bishop, and he must be sure with moral certitude that the person is actually possessed by a demon, not simply physically or mentally ill, and consent from the possessed should be gained. And an important one here, no media are actually allowed to be present. So, what are the signs that someone is possessed by the devil rather than suffering from, say, a mental illness? Well, priests are told to look out for things like super strength, speaking in languages you don't know, displaying violent or aggressive behaviour, and having a strong aversion to holy water or churches. So just how common is this? Well, exorcism looms much, much larger in popular culture than it actually happens. Movies from 1973's The Exorcist all the way through to this year's The Pope's Exorcist, starring our own Russell Crowe, have increased our interest in exorcism and actually led to spikes in real exorcisms happening. Now, exorcisms are kept secret most of the time, except when they go badly, badly wrong. Now, New Zealand has had a few high-profile tragic cases. In the year 2000, Joanna Lee died, and the pastor of her Christian sect was convicted of manslaughter. And Janet Moses died way back in 2007 during a makatu lifting exorcism. Now, 5 people were found guilty of Janet's manslaughter. Official Catholic Church figures provided to us for this show us that in the past 5 years, permissions were given for a total of 12 Catholic Church exorcisms in New Zealand. 6 in Auckland and Hamilton, not all of those were carried out, and there were also 6 approved in Christchurch. 2 of those were for the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer, the group that we are looking into tonight. That is 12 times in the past 5 years when our Catholic leaders have agreed that the devil has shown up inside a Kiwi believer and needed to be swiftly gotten rid of.
And so you raised concerns with the leaders?
Yes, I did.
And were you ignored?
Yes.
And how did that make you feel?
Desperate in a way. Who do you turn to when, you know, the very people that say if you have a problem, speak to us, feel free to talk to us, you know, raise your concerns, and when you raise your concerns, you're brushed off.
Brushed off by leader Michael Mary, Elizabeth left the Sons only to be cut off from everything and everyone she'd known.
The community are very much controlled by those in charge, and so contact with those who have left is discouraged. It's like you never were. You're cut off. You're like a dead limb.
Did you leave because of the way the leaders treated you when you raised concerns?
Yes.
Do you think the rules and regulations were always followed in relation to exorcisms at the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer?
From what I can gather and what I've been told, no, I don't think so.
For weeks now, I've been trying to get answers from the leadership here, but both fathers Michael and Anthony Mary have refused an interview. Instead, a few days ago, the leader, Michael Mary, chose to do an hour-long sermon to his followers, in which he responded to the allegations.
As I speak, an investigative reporter from TV3 waits to do a story on us. The journalist approached us recently with a number of speculative questions. This statement will serve as my answer.
Michael Mary said he and other leaders were not manipulative and denied interfering in the lives of families.
Our community is very popular, and we are often asked to visit families and individuals.
In response to the penance of licking the floor, he said this practice was discontinued in 2012, but
if a member practiced these today, it would be his private choice and only with permission of his spiritual director.
He also said the only physical penances that are taught at the church are things like fasting from a meal or avoiding sweets.
Did this result in some children self-harming? I would like to know who.
On the subject of exorcisms, Michael Mary denies any exorcisms have been performed without permission from the bishop.
Our take on this is that the allegation simply cannot be true.
Despite the Bishop of Auckland confirming it was not normal to tie someone up during an exorcism, Michael Mary said restraints, or what he called a safety harness, can be necessary to minimise the risk of danger.
During an exorcism, when the devil takes over the person's body, it is not possible for an average person to restrain the mighty strength that is let loose in the person.
He went on to confirm that exorcisms should continue even when people asked that they stop.
Why? Because the devil, speaking through the possessed person, will call the exorcism to a halt as soon as possible. The evil spirit does not want to be exorcised.
Former member of the church, Elizabeth, watched the live-streamed sermon on YouTube.
What did you make of Father Michael's public response to his followers?
It was the height of arrogance. I couldn't believe that he would actually stand up there in the place of a sermon and put on this show for the world, really, not only for the parishioners. There were children in that congregation, you know. It's about him and his behaviour. He just glances over it and deflects it to an attack on the parish.
What is your message to people who were sitting there listening to that sermon?
Well, I hope they listened very carefully, and that they could hear what he's actually saying. Read between the lines, listen to what he's not saying.
February 2022, the Parliament anti-mandate protest.
If we don't get this right, then this whole country's going to be subjected to a tyranny that will not finish.
Father Michael Mary joined protesters, stoking fear about vaccine mandates.
This is a serious moral issue for New Zealand because the whole country's going to go down.
At the protest, Michael Mary spoke of the importance of freedoms, but the overriding concern from the 17 people we've spoken to is that freedom of thought is exactly what he didn't allow. There have been accusations of controlling behaviour, of spiritual abuse and of unauthorised exorcisms, and it raises an important question. Why has nothing been done about it? In recent years, we know at least 7 people raised concerns or complaints about the sons to leaders at the Christchurch diocese. Mental health counsellor Michael Hempseed was one of them. He went to the then Christchurch Bishop, Paul Martin, but didn't hear back.
And you received no phone call back or
Nothing.
invitation to meet?
Absolutely nothing.
How do you feel about that?
Utterly betrayed. The church is there to protect people. The church should be there to look after particularly innocent children. Utterly betrayed.
Margaret approached the safeguarding office last year.
What happened as a result of the concerns you raised?
I don't know. It was taken back and that was it. I never heard any more.
Raising local issues with one's diocese can be tricky. If it's not sexual misconduct, they're certainly not going to break their legs to go and see what's going on.
You took your concerns to Bishop Paul Martin. What happened?
Nothing.
Can you elaborate?
I sent an email asking, basically laying out some of my concerns and asking for a meeting with him. The only reply I got was basically thank you for acknowledging that they had received the email.
Paul Martin was formerly the Bishop of Christchurch. He's now Archbishop of Wellington, effectively making him one of the leaders of the Catholic Church in New Zealand. We did send detailed questions to Archbishop Paul Martin, most of which he did not respond to. However, he accepted he was aware of issues regarding the culture at the Sons and simply said to us, the issues are being managed.
Is that good enough?
I would have thought not.
Religious expert and emeritus professor Peter Lynham.
This is a very serious matter because much of what's produced the Royal Commission has been about practices that have protected people in authority rather than protecting people who are at risk. And to me, this is why you need to be very public and open about what has gone wrong.
This includes ensuring strict rules around exorcisms are followed. It's considered best practice that advice from a medical professional is sought beforehand to eliminate the chance of psychological illness. Paul Martin has not said what mental health checks were done when approving exorcisms at the Sons, but sources have told us there were none.
If you permit priests to use religious authority with all the terror potentially of eternal hell that you can invoke if you say that this is at stake, when in fact the person is psychologically injured, well, that is right up there in the sort of abuse that the Royal Commission is investigating.
Peter Lynham says given the multiple allegations, the bishop should have acted.
The first and fundamental concern of the Church must be to intervene to protect lay people whose very spiritual health and well-being is at stake.
Should that happen now, do you think?
From what you've told me, this should be an urgent matter for the Church to face up to.
And while church authorities ponder calls for action, Elizabeth has a message to followers of the Sons.
Don't doubt that inner voice. God gave you a mind to question.
And that's what you'd urge people
Absolutely.
to do?
Bring it out into the light. God works in the light. The devil works in the darkness.